Chapter 236. Yang Chendong's performance fell into Junko's eyes, and she was very proud of herself. Appearance was her greatest weapon, and now it seemed that it was really effective. Presumably, no matter what kind of request she put forward next, this loyal duke of the great Ming dynasty would definitely not refuse. Junko's pride lasted for 3 seconds. When she wanted to see Yang Chendong's performance, to her disappointment, he actually returned to his previous indifferent smile. She felt that the absent-minded loyal duke just now was so unreal, as if she had imagined it. "Who are you? Where are you from?" While Junko was still in a daze, Yang Chendong had already asked her about her origin. The reason why he asked this question was also because of Yang Chendong's confidence. With the power of the Security Bureau, if there was really such a young and beautiful woman in the capital, it was impossible for them not to even mention it. Although he had never ordered Yang Chendong to collect beautiful women, if there was such a woman, Yang Chendong believed that his subordinates would definitely report it. But there was no such report, so there could only be one answer: this woman did not belong to the capital. Junko had always regarded men as nothing, and except for her father, she rarely pretended to talk to men. But for some reason, when Yang Chendong asked her this question, she couldn't help but reveal her identity. She replied softly, "My name is Ohara Junko, and I am the Princess of Japan." But just after she said this, the captain of the guards, Kobayashi, whispered in disbelief, "Princess, be careful with your words." No wonder Kobayashi was so nervous. It was because Junko's identity had never been disclosed to the outside world. Even the Ministry of Rights of the Great Ming Dynasty did not know about her existence. But now, she took the initiative to reveal it. No wonder he was so anxious. "I'm sorry, Kobayashi, I forgot myself." Junko, who heard the reminder, immediately blushed. She knew that she had made a mistake, and it was not a small mistake. She immediately whispered to Kobayashi in Japanese. The conversation between Kobayashi and Junko was in Japanese, and there was not much difference between it and the Japanese of the later generations. But in the relatively isolated Great Ming Dynasty, there were very few people who could really understand this language, and Yang Chendong was one of them. In his previous life, he went to Japan to perform many tasks, so naturally, he was very familiar with the language there. At this moment, he naturally heard the conversation between the master and servant. Although he understood it, the clever Yang Chendong still pretended that he didn't understand it, and even showed that he didn't understand anything. He didn't even clearly hear the first sentence of the identity introduction in Chinese. "What did you say? Junko? What a strange name. Where are you from? Who are your parents?" When Yang Chendong asked like this, it could be noticed that Junko's face instantly relaxed a lot. Junko only heard her name and didn't understand the identity introduction. At the same time, she quickly thought of another identity and said, "I'm a businessman from Japan, an ally of the Great Ming Dynasty. I've long heard that the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty is so prosperous, and I always yearn for it. This time, I came out to see the world." Soon, she fabricated an identity, and it was half true and half false, which was no problem for most people in the Great Ming Dynasty. But in the end, she underestimated Yang Chendong too much. Not to mention whether the Security Bureau could find out her true identity. For a loyal man who knew Japanese, what secrets could she have in front of him? It's just that Yang Chendong didn't mean to point it out. Since the other party had intentionally concealed their identity, they must have other motives. Although he was curious, he still decided to get in touch with them and see if there were any opportunities for him to gain. Of course, whether this was related to Junko's beautiful appearance, only the 6th young master Yang himself knew. It turned out to be a foreign friend. "Hee, it's this official's eyes that are blind. As you said, the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty is indeed very prosperous. Since you're here, you should take a good look. But forgive this eunuch for being busy, so I won't accompany you," Yang Chendong said with a smile. After saying this, he turned around and left. Yang Chendong's performance, in addition to being polite, also had a trace of unfamiliarity, which made Junko very unhappy. All along, men in her eyes were just lives that only had desires. As long as she wanted, she could summon them at any time and send them away at any time. How could there be someone like Yang Chendong, who didn't seem to be moved by her appearance and took the initiative to keep people 1,000 miles away? Maybe it was because he was not convinced, or maybe it was because he wanted to prove something. Junko unexpectedly said, "Great Ming Dynasty's loyal duke, you just said, the history of lion-eating sure, too quickly." This little girl didn't understand it very well. "I don't know if you can ask for advice?" This little girl actually admires the loyal duke very much. While speaking, Junko also showed a shy look as much as possible. This was what she learned from the concubines in her father's imperial palace. Although she looked down on that kind of woman from the bottom of her heart, she had to admit that in order to survive, sometimes their special performance was indeed worth learning. "Oh? You, a girl, are also interested in the history of lion-eating sure?" Yang Chendong, who had half of his body turned around, suddenly raised the corner of his mouth at this moment. He deliberately showed an attitude of isolating the other party in order to change from passivity to initiative. Women, sometimes beautiful women, were so strange. The more you took the initiative, the more unwilling the other party would be to pay attention to you. On the contrary, if you ignored the other party would look at you differently. Just now, Yang Chendong deliberately showed a different attitude, and sure enough, Junko was hooked. Since the other party had such a request, Yang Chendong, who wanted to know the other party's purpose, naturally wouldn't be polite. "Yes, Great Ming Dynasty's loyal duke, this little girl is indeed very interested in the history of lion-eating sure." Seeing Yang Chendong turn around, Junko immediately showed a confident look. "You can call me Dong Shui like others. Since Junko is interested, why don't we talk about it in the manner?" Yang Chendong politely maintained a smile, and then made a gentlemanly gesture. Seeing Yang Chendong's invitation, Junko was very happy, and even lowered her head shyly. She knew that such an approach would be very lethal. "Thank you, Dong Shui." Junko agreed and strode toward Yang Chendong. Shaolin and the other bodyguards followed closely behind him, but when they arrived at the gates of the Yang Manor, Hu Mang, who had always been by the sixth young master's side, suddenly stretched out his large hand and blocked Shaolin and the others. He then said in a heavy voice, "The manor is an important place and is considered private property. Outsiders are not allowed to enter without permission. It would be best if you all stood guard outside." Shaolin was a little dissatisfied that the princess wasted her limited time in such a seemingly ordinary manner. Now that he heard that he and others were not allowed to enter, how could he be willing to comply? He immediately widened his eyes, looked at Tiger's mane, and said loudly, "Baka." "Huh? What do you want to do?" Although Tiger's mane did not understand Japanese and did not understand the meaning of this sentence, he could see that Shaolin was angry. He immediately glared back at him with an unyielding look. As soon as Tiger's mane got angry, the tall Beta Persei directly took a step forward, almost sticking to Shaolin. Then, with his unique height, he stared at Shaolin condescendingly, as if he was ready to attack at any time. Not only Beta Persei, but even Yang Wu, as well as Ling Feng of Qiu V's first guard, also looked ready to attack at any time. The originally harmonious atmosphere became a lot more tense because of Shaolin's words. A murderous aura filled the place, and even Junko, who did not know Kung Fu, felt a chill. Junko didn't understand why she felt this way, but she was smart enough to know that she didn't have any advantage right now. She immediately scolded Kobayashi in Japanese, "Kobayashi-kun, this is not Japan, nor is it the palace. Please control your temper and personality. Princess, they don't let us in. What if someone wants to harm you? Won't it be very dangerous?" Shaolin replied, not to be outdone. In Japan, seniority was still very important. Shaolin was just a guard captain. Logically speaking, he should not talk to his master like this. But when it came to the other person's life, he did not have to worry so much. It was because Junko knew this that she did not blame Shaolin. On the contrary, she also thought that it was indeed too risky to enter Yang village alone. After a slight hesitation, she nodded, "Well, you are right. Let's leave." After Junko finished talking to Kobayashi, she looked at Yang Chendong and said with a beautiful smile, "Dong Shuai, I'm very sorry. My servant reminded me that I have something important to do. I think I have to leave first." She even knew the name of the servant. Yang Chendong was very interested in Junko. He was even more curious about her purpose in coming to the great Ming dynasty. "That is really bad news. But since Miss Junko has something important to do, I won't delay you any longer, please. Thank you Dong Shuai for your understanding. If there is a chance, I will definitely come to visit Dong Shuai." Junko said very politely. "There will definitely be a chance," Yang Chendong said with incomparable certainty. Of course, in Junko's eyes, it was hard to say whether this person was too arrogant or not. Finally, Junko left with Xiaolin and 7 or 8 guards. She left Yangjia village. Yang Chendong's gaze followed them as they left. Even when they were out of sight, Yang Chendong still maintained the same posture as before. Chapter 237. Cough, young master, Miss Junko has left. Seeing Yang Chendong still standing there in a daze, although Tiger's Mane didn't want to, he still reminded him. "Well, I know." Hearing this, Yang Chendong came back to his senses, but his face was as usual, without the slightest embarrassment. In fact, there was nothing to be embarrassed about, because he wasn't thinking about Junko, nor her beauty, but the purpose of her visit. Because in the history he knew, there didn't seem to be such a woman, but she still came, which could only mean one thing, that history has changed, and his advantage of foresight has gradually been lost. In fact, in history, although there was a person called Junko, she didn't come to the Ming dynasty. At that time, although the Ming dynasty defeated the Walla, it was a narrow victory, and such a record certainly didn't attract the admiration and respect of others, so Junko didn't come to the Ming dynasty. All of this changed because of the appearance of Yang Chendong. Tiger's Mane informed the Security Bureau to investigate the Japanese diplomatic mission, if necessary, spend a lot of money to buy 1 or 2 people. It was precisely because he knew that the advantage of foresight was gone, that Yang Chendong needed to deal with everything carefully. "Young master, don't worry," Tiger's Mane said confidently. In their eyes, a small country like Japan was just a pirate, not worthy of being treated seriously. This was all because he didn't know that the invasion of Japan would happen hundreds of years later, and he didn't know what kind of ambitions the country on this island would have in the future. But Yang Chendong knew, instinctively, he never underestimated this country and its people, so he paid special attention to anything related to them. With the order of the 6th young master, the Security Bureau quickly and effectively operated. Soon, they bribed a cook from the Japanese diplomatic mission with a large sum of money. From the cook, they not only learned about Junko's situation, but also made a rough outline of the political situation in Japan. The information was sent to Yang Chendong's study early the next morning, and after the 6th young master spent a lot of effort to deal with Hu Yen and the other girls, he saw the latest information on the table. Junko's appearance naturally couldn't be hidden from Hu Yen and Xiao Yin, the 2 girls who stayed in the manor. In fact, Yang Chendong didn't need to hide it from them. It was precisely because of this that Hu Yen and Xiao Yin felt a sense of crisis when they heard that a beautiful girl, who was only 15 or 16 years old, had appeared outside the Yang family manor and met with the 6th young master. After some discussion, they immediately notified Madame Xue and Madame Xiang, who were still in the capital, who were editing the program. That night, they had a fierce battle with Yang Chendong, but the 6th young master, who was in peak condition, was not afraid of them, and just spent a little more time and effort to deal with them. In the morning, Yang Chendong saw the information on the table, and it gave him a general understanding of the current situation in Japan, and at the same time, he quickly came up with a way to deal with it. Once, the non-mainstream crosstalk actor Guo Digang said, "Give me 3,000 urban management, and I can flatten Tokyo." Yang Chendong also had such a dream, but it could only be a dream. Under the premise of world peace, such a dream was destined to be impossible and impossible to achieve. But now, it was different. Although it was still the same world, it was hundreds of years earlier, and the world had not even experienced the First World War. Some of the powerful countries in history were still in the early stages of development, and some, such as the United States, had not even appeared yet. With such a good opportunity, Yang Chendong would of course make the first move, and the so-called powerful countries could go to hell. There could only be one order in this world, and that was, the Han people were the masters, the Han people were the center, and the Han people's will was the world's will, and the Han people's thoughts were the world's thoughts. Since that was the case, there was no need for Japan to exist, and it was inevitable to understand them in advance. Yang Chendong also thought about this problem when he had nothing to do. Japan was different from some Western countries, and they actually had some relations with the Han people. Some people even said that Japan was a branch of the Han people, and there was a basis for it. Although it was not accepted by the world, one thing was true, and that was, other than the language, the Japanese looked the most similar to the Han people. Should such a country be completely destroyed, or assimilated for his own use? If it was the latter, what should he do? Junko's appearance was an opportunity to let Yang Chendong see the opportunity to break the fortress from the inside. "Come on, inform Yang-san, let him spread the news, and do it like this." Calling Tiger's mane in front of him, Yang Chendong whispered. In a medium-sized inn in the capital, Junko had just woken up, but looking at her state, it was obvious that she did not sleep well last night. After coming out of the Yang village, Junko did not idle, but did a lot of work and understanding. But the more she did so, the more Yang Chendong's name lingered in her mind. Previously, she only knew that the army that defeated the Walla was led by a loyal duke of the great Ming dynasty. In the future, it was just a matter of relying on the strength of the army and the number of people to win. But after yesterday's trip to Yang village, Junko had a certain understanding of him. She realized how young and talented this Duke of Loyalty was, and how he managed to achieve what he had today. Yang Bao, Immortal Abode, Heaven Beyond Heaven, Yang Family Bank, and Yang Family Bank, one after another, especially the most mysterious mercenary group. When all this information was gathered in front of Junko, she could not even look down on this person. "Princess, what's wrong? Did you not sleep well last night?" Captain Kobayashi walked into the room at this time, and when he saw Junko's slightly haggard appearance, he immediately asked with a face full of surprise. Kobayashi was secretly happy to accept the task of protecting Junko. He was also a man, and a young man at that, so he naturally liked Junko's appearance very much. But he was very clear about the difference between his identity and the princess's. It was impossible to be together, but being able to have close contact with her, how could it not be a kind of satisfaction? Therefore, in his heart, Kobayashi cared a lot about Junko. Seeing that the princess seemed to be in a bad mood, he naturally turned pale with fright. "It's nothing, Kobayashi. I just miss my imperial father a little. By the way, I'll have to trouble you to collect information about this loyal duke. The more the better, and the more detailed the better. Please." Junko forced a charming smile and said to Kobayashi. "Hai, please rest assured, princess. I will do it immediately." Kobayashi saw that the princess was so happy with him, and was naturally very happy. He immediately agreed and turned around to carry out the task. But what Kobayashi did not know was that not long after he left, the Japanese diplomatic mission arrived in the vicinity of the inn and began to investigate. This time, the Japanese diplomatic mission sent a lot of people, and many of them were representatives of merchants. They wanted to investigate the Great Ming Dynasty's market and see if there was any possibility of further trade relations. While deepening the understanding between the two countries, it would also enrich the Japanese economy. After all, a small country like Japan almost had to buy many things from outside. This gave Junko an opportunity. After spending a lot of money to get a place, she disguised herself as a man and hid in the diplomatic mission. Logically speaking, she was not discovered all the way. Now that she had successfully arrived at the Great Ming Dynasty's capital, the possibility of being discovered was even smaller. But all of this was ruined by the appearance of Yang Chendong. Not long ago, the head of the Japanese diplomatic mission, Aoki Yuki, received an important message from his cook. It was that the daughter of the emperor, Ohara Junko, had arrived in the Great Ming Dynasty and was walking around with ominous intentions. When he received this news, Aoki Yuki's face was naturally full of disbelief. He was the confidant of General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, which was why he was able to get such a good job. But if he let the general know that the princess was also in the diplomatic mission and was in contact with the higher-ups of the Great Ming Dynasty, his life would be in danger. Therefore, regardless of whether the news was true or false, Aoki Yuki had to investigate the matter clearly. If he believed that Princess Junko was really in the Great Ming Dynasty, then there was no need to say anything. He had to kill her. First, to eliminate future troubles, and second, to create a gap between the Great Ming Dynasty and the Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty. If there was a murder case, it would be even more difficult to unite them. The Emperor would have to rely on the power of General Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Only in this way could the general's position be unshakable. Aoki Yuki made a decision and immediately called his guard, Iwai Shang, to report the news. At the same time, he also ordered an investigation. If the situation was true, he could deal with it on the spot. After receiving the order, Iwai Shang brought people to the inn. After investigating, they really found out that Junko was in the inn. While Iwai Shang was shocked, he reported the news to the higher-ups and informed the head of the diplomatic mission, Aoki Yuki. After some discussion, they decided to take action while it was dark. They had to kill Junko and the others in the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. Through the cook who was bribed with money and the observation of the Security Bureau's spies, Yang Chendong easily determined the decision and mission of the Japanese diplomatic mission. He immediately laughed. Very good, the young master naturally won't let go of the opportunity. A hero saving a beauty? This young master likes it very much. Immediately, after Yang Chendong sighed, he also made a careful arrangement. In the evening, Shaolin, who had been running around all day, rushed back with a few guards. According to the instructions of Princess Junko, they collected a lot of information about Yang Chendong. Chapter 238. Speaking of which, this truly wasn't that difficult of a task, because any random person from the streets of the capital would be able to tell one some stories about the Dong Shui. Bringing a lot of information back to the inn, Kobayashi handed it over to Junko. When he saw the happy expression on her face, he felt that his efforts today weren't in vain. Only now did he have time to eat something to fill his stomach. Just as Kobayashi was about to start eating, a trusted guard came in from outside the door. "Captain, the situation outside doesn't seem right. I keep feeling that there is a pair of eyes watching us in the dark." "What?" Throwing away the food in his hand, Kobayashi turned around and looked at the guard who came to report the news with a shocked face. He believed in the ability of his subordinates, and there were some things that he wouldn't say casually. Even if he said it, he should be able to find something. At this moment, he didn't want to eat anymore. Instead, he turned around and walked out of the kitchen, went to a corner of the small courtyard, and began to close his eyes and sense. Kobayashi was originally a guard of the royal family. Because of his outstanding performance, he was arranged to protect the safety of Princess Junko. His strength wasn't weak, and he even came from a ninja family. It was precisely because of this that he quickly sensed something different and a vague sense of danger. Ninjas sometimes have a very strong sixth sense, and Ikigami and the others aren't that strong, so Kobayashi quickly felt the danger. When he learned that he was being watched, Kobayashi didn't panic. This was originally within his expectations. With so many people, and the princess was so beautiful, it was difficult not to be discovered, but he didn't expect it to be so fast. It was precisely because he was prepared that Kobayashi calmly came to the young master's room. At this time, Junko was looking down at some information about Yang Chendong. When she saw the guard captain suddenly appear, she was a little surprised. Kobayashi? Don't you need to rest? Why are you here? We don't need you now, go rest. Princess, we've been discovered. There are many unfamiliar faces outside the inn. It's very likely that they were sent by Ambassador Aoki. I think we need to move. Shaolin said in a slightly anxious voice, his eyes filled with determination. Junko was like a goddess in Kobayashi's eyes. As long as he was still alive, he would never let anyone hurt the princess. He swore. What? Junko said in Japanese in surprise, and then a hint of nervousness appeared on her face. Originally, according to Junko's plan, the danger was only on the voyage from Japan to the Great Ming Dynasty. As long as she safely arrived at the Great Ming Dynasty, she could reveal her identity and then propose marriage to the Great Ming Dynasty's emperor. At that time, whether she chose a prince or even the Great Ming Dynasty's emperor, she would not have to worry about her safety. However, because she had no understanding of the situation in the Great Ming Dynasty, she didn't know until she came to the capital. Although the Great Ming Dynasty's emperor had a prince, he was still in his infancy and it was impossible to arrange a marriage. As for the Great Ming Dynasty's emperor Zhu Qiyu, although he was very young, he didn't have any deep foundation. In addition, there were many concubines in the palace. Even if he wanted to arrange a marriage, it would be difficult for him to provide any help to Japan in a short time. Not to mention that the Great Ming Dynasty was now ruled by two emperors. She hadn't even solved her own problems. It was even more difficult to get support. The marriage didn't seem to be feasible, so Junko didn't immediately reveal her identity, which also made her safer. Now that the opponent finally came to her door, how could she not panic? Kobayashi, where are we going? After the panic, Junko pretended to be calm and said. After all, she was only a little girl less than 16 years old. Although she was born noble and very beautiful, when it came to facing a real sword, she was afraid that she didn't have any more experience than others. Kobayashi doesn't know. He shook his head very honestly. Princess, you can choose to reveal your identity and marry the Great Ming Dynasty's emperor as a concubine, or we can kill our way out of the capital, find a place with a coastline, and find a boat to return home. Although Kobayashi was confident in his own strength, he only had 8 guards with him this time, and the disadvantage in numbers was his shortcoming. He knew very well that Aoki Yuki, as an ambassador, was leading a team of nearly 500 people. Among them, there were more than 300 soldiers who could fight. He didn't have much confidence in ensuring Naoki's safety in a battle of 8 against 300 people. Let me think about it. Junko didn't expect the choice to come so quickly, and she couldn't make a decision for the time being. After all, this was related to her marriage. The man a woman chose was often related to her life's happiness, so she had to think about it. Princess, there's not much time left. Please make a decision as soon as possible. I'll go out and take a look. Kobayashi didn't want Junko to make the first choice. No man would be able to accept the idea of giving away their goddess. But he couldn't guarantee that the princess could leave safely, so he was in a dilemma. He might as well not participate and let the princess make a wise decision. Some decisions weren't so easy to make. While Junko was still in a dilemma, Kobayashi once again entered the room without permission. This time, his face became much more serious. Princess, it's already dark, and they're about to make a move. There are enemies at the front door, back door, and side door of the inn. I'm afraid we'll have to kill our way out. Kill our way out? Will we die? Junko's nature as a young girl finally revealed itself. After all, she was still young, and few people wouldn't be afraid in the face of death. Junko's expectant expression made Kobayashi's heart bleed. He didn't want to disappoint the princess, but he didn't have absolute confidence. He could only avoid the question and say, "Princess, as long as I'm still alive, I won't let anyone hurt you." The hidden meaning was that as long as Kobayashi was still alive, he would desperately protect Junko's safety. But what if he died? After Junko understood the meaning of these words, she nodded with a blank expression. "Well, then we'll rush out. If possible, we'll go to the seaside and find a way to return home." Junko finally made a decision, and that was to not marry the great Ming dynasty. Every woman had her own dreams, not to mention a girl like Junko who had been high and mighty since childhood. She might have more pursuits for marriage, but her man was destined to be different from the rest. He was destined to be the strongest in the world. After Junko decided not to marry the great Ming dynasty, Kobayashi's face lit up with joy. For him, even if they couldn't live together, being able to die together was a very happy thing. After unifying the goal, Junko first changed into a set of black clothes that she had prepared beforehand. The loose clothes not only allowed her to hide better in the dark, but also allowed her to conceal her perfect identity. After everything was done, under the protection of Kobayashi, the group of 6 rushed out of the inn's front door. As expected of a guard who had once stayed in the imperial family, Kobayashi didn't choose to blindly attack. Instead, he sent 2 of his team members to rush out of the back door, and another 2 to rush out of the side door, creating an illusion that they were about to break out of the encirclement. Then, he led the remaining 4 guards to protect the princess from the front door. The reason why they chose the front door was because it was on the street. From here, they could see the soldiers of the military office patrolling the area. Although these people might not necessarily help them, they could at least deter the enemy. Under the leadership of Kobayashi, the 6 people rushed out of the inn's front door. What greeted them was a rain of short arrows. He saw Kobayashi holding a ninja sword and constantly waving it in front of him. One after another, the arrows hit the blade, making crackling sounds before falling to the ground. "Hurry up and rush out." Seeing that the enemy had even used bows and arrows, Kobayashi knew that the situation was more serious than he had imagined. These people had no scruples at all. They just wanted to kill the princess. A wave of arrows was blocked by Kobayashi and his team. The price they paid was that one of the guards was injured by an arrow and lost the ability to move quickly. However, at this time, Kobayashi didn't have time to check the injuries of his brothers. What he had to do now was to take advantage of the enemy's second wave of attacks to leave this place as soon as possible. The farther the better. "Follow me, rush out of here." Before he could finish his words, 4 figures suddenly appeared in front of him. They appeared like ghosts, and then 4 ninja swords slashed toward him. 4 ninjas. Facing such opponents, Kobayashi was shocked. At the same time, he stomped his feet on the ground and jumped into the air. He shouted in Japanese, "Protect the princess." Kobayashi couldn't help but be surprised. He originally thought that Ambassador Aoki Yuki only sent samurai. Although they were difficult to deal with, they still had a chance of survival. But now, seeing ninjas who were famous for being good at assassination, he knew that this time, he was afraid that things were not looking good for him. Although the strength of the 4 ninjas was not as good as his, after all, there were too many opponents. If it was just to protect himself or even escape, Kobayashi still had some confidence, but his duty was to protect the princess, which was very difficult to accomplish. Kobayashi, who was in the air, quickly flashed through his mind, but at the same time, his empty left hand was not idle. When he reached into his pocket and took out a few ninja darts in his hand. Swish! With a wave of his left hand, the darts were thrown out with great force. They flew straight toward the 4 ninjas who were chasing after him. Kobayashi, whose strength was far higher than ordinary people, successfully pierced the throat of a ninja. One of the 4 opponents was killed. However, Kobayashi was not happy at all, because he had noticed that the 3 men who were protecting the princess had been surrounded by a group of black-clothed samurai. The princess, who was surrounded in the middle, was pale. She was like a small boat in the sea, which could capsize at any time. Chapter 239. The situation was so dangerous that Kobayashi, who could have continued to fight in a guerrilla style, gave up his advantage. Instead, he rushed into the crowd on the street, and then rushed to the left and right, killing 3 Japanese samurai in a row. Kobayashi's speed was very fast, and his sword moves were also very strange. Coupled with his unpredictable movements, it would take a lot of effort for anyone to kill him. Unfortunately, his mission was to protect Princess Junko. For this purpose, he had no choice but to give up his advantage. He turned around and rushed into the crowd, waving his sword and slashing. The sudden addition of Kobayashi did indeed relieve the pressure of the 3 guards protecting Junko, but as more and more men in black rushed over from the back door and the side door, Kobayashi knew that the 4 men he sent to the east and attack in the west were probably dead, and it should be his turn next. The 3 guards, plus Kobayashi and Junko, were surrounded by 40 to 50 black-clothed men. Longbows and short swords rained down on them, and in less than 30 breaths of time, 2 more of the 3 guards fell. Finally, only Kobayashi, the princess, and the last guard were left. "Captain, I'll fight with them. Please protect the princess and rush out." The last guard saw no hope. After shouting at Kobayashi, he rushed out. However, when he was still halfway out, his chest had been hit by 3 arrows. Then, with his eyes wide open, his body leaned back and fell heavily to the ground. Ah! Seeing the death of her bodyguard at such a close distance, Junko, who had always been calm, finally screamed out in horror. In the dark night, her cry was like the cry of an oriole. It was so different and so amazing. Who is it? Perhaps it was because of the shout, or perhaps it was not time for her to die. A thunderous voice sounded, and suddenly, a group of people appeared on the other side of the street, slowly approaching. Captain Ikase, who was leading the team, saw that the target was close at hand and the mission was about to be completed. Suddenly, another group of people came from behind. His eyes showed that he was unwilling to give up. "Come on, rush up, kill the target, and then retreat." Ikase thought that there was still some distance between the 2 sides. As long as he was given time, killing the princess and Kobayashi was just a matter of raising his sword. Qi Shang's idea was not wrong. At a distance of a few dozen meters, he did have the opportunity to make a move. Unfortunately, he didn't know who was approaching in the dark. If it was daytime and he could see the luxurious carriage clearly, he wouldn't think so. For no other reason than the fact that the owner of this luxurious carriage was known to everyone in the capital, the Duke of Loyalty, Yang Chendong. It was Yang Chendong who was passing by. As for whether it was intentional or not many people knew. The important thing was that Yang Chendong had indeed appeared here and allowed his servant, Beta Persei, to yell at him first. But after he shouted, the other party had no intention of stopping. This infuriated Beta Persei. "Young master, these people won't listen to our advice. Should we attack? Please give the order." "Attack." Yang Chendong's emotionless voice came from the luxurious carriage. Standing on the street were all Japanese samurai and ninjas. He wouldn't feel the slightest bit of heartache no matter how many of them died, nor would he show any mercy. Standing on both sides of the carriage, a row of Ling Feng had been waiting for this order for a long time. When they heard the word, "Sixth young master," the 30 people of Ling Feng started a shooting competition by themselves. The reason why it was called a competition was because the 3 classes were competing with each other to see who could achieve more. Bang bang bang. In the dark night, the sound of gunshots was so deafening and earth-shattering. Along with the sound of gunshots, a dazzling red light flashed like a meteor, and the Japanese samurai standing dozens of meters away fell to the ground one by one. "Princess, get down." Seeing the red light coming, Kobayashi instinctively hugged Junko and threw himself to the ground. But he didn't know how superfluous this action was. The Leng Feng had already received the order not to hurt the princess. With night vision goggles, how could they hurt Junko in the dark? Bursts of gunshots sounded like firecrackers being ignited. After 2 waves of continuous attacks, there were no more samurai standing on the street. In a short time, except for a few people like Ikigami who reacted very quickly and escaped at the first time, the other Japanese samurai present on the scene were all killed. Clean up the battlefield. Seeing that the scene became silent after a burst of gunshots, Tiger's Mane replaced Yang Chendong and shouted the order. For a time, 30 Leng Feng and Chiu V's first guard began to move forward in a searching manner. In the process of moving forward, there were gunshots from time to time. Whenever they found someone who was not dead, the Leng Feng automatically fired a shot. This also depended on the usual training and teaching. In Yang Chendong's words, most of the time, mercy to the enemy was cruelty to oneself. The sound of gunshots came from time to time, making the samurai who were injured but not dead show a determined look on their faces. Knowing that they couldn't escape death if they continued to hide like this, they stood up one by one, wanting to make a last stand. But such an action was not even a threat in the eyes of the Leng Feng. They were already prepared, so they only needed to keep pulling the trigger, and the samurai who stood out voluntarily became a ghost under the gun. At this time, Junko was also lying on the ground. Although she was protected by Kobayashi, she was still trembling. She didn't know who was coming, and she didn't know what fate was waiting for her. She didn't even dare to think about it. Compared with Junko who was scared, Kobayashi's heart was also flustered. He was very clear about the strength of these samurai and even some ninjas. But these people were so vulnerable in front of the people who came, he couldn't help but think, if it was him, facing advanced firearms, how likely would he be to survive? While he was still comparing in his heart, the footsteps were getting closer and closer, and when they were about to reach him, Kobayashi finally couldn't help but shout in somewhat awkward Chinese, "Don't kill us, we surrender." It was very difficult to make a samurai, a ninja of the Japanese imperial family, shout out surrender, and this was equivalent to Kobayashi cutting off his own path as a samurai. But for the sake of the princess under him, he made this decision resolutely. Kobayashi's sudden shout attracted the attention of the 5 Leng Feng with guns. In fact, they have been paying attention to the movements here for a long time. Even if Kobayashi didn't shout, they would soon find this place. Shouting was just a way to reveal their position in advance. As if to prove that he didn't want to kill, after Kobayashi shouted, he took the initiative to throw the ninja sword in his hand to the ground, then stood up with his hands on his head. "Don't kill us, we are also victims." "Yes, we are victims." As Kobayashi stood up, Junko was also liberated, and naturally stood up, and imitated Kobayashi, holding his head with both hands, with a pitiful expression. "Bring them to the young master." Seeing that the princess appeared, safe and sound, Tiger's man, who was in charge of commanding the battle, was relieved, and then took the initiative to step forward, leading Junko and Kobayashi to the side of the luxurious carriage. Kobayashi was naturally specially treated, and he was stopped a dozen meters away from the carriage. But this time, in the face of dozens of black muzzles, he became very obedient. Junko, who followed Tiger's man, smoothly came to the side of the carriage, and saw the scene of the carriage curtain being lifted, revealing the young and confident face of Yang Chendong. "Oh. It turned out to be Miss Junko, we are really fated." Yang Chendong slightly raised the corner of his mouth, revealing a faint smile while looking at Junko. Junko didn't expect that the person turned out to be Yang Chendong, but since it was an acquaintance, of course, it couldn't be better. She immediately exclaimed, "Dong Shui, someone wants to kill me, please save me." "Oh. Who did such a beautiful Junko offend?" Why did you make such a big fuss? Yang Chendong didn't say whether he wanted to save them or not. Instead, he looked like he wanted to know the reason. Junko didn't want to expose her identity too early. After all, she didn't know Yang Chendong, and if she exposed her identity, what would she do if he used it to threaten her father? But now that she needed his help, how could she explain the situation in front of her? Junko was still struggling whether to tell her true identity in order to answer Dong Shuai's question. At the other end of the street, there was a burst of dense and complicated footsteps. Hearing the footsteps, Junko's face was once again filled with fear. Yang Chendong, on the other hand, seemed to have expected all of this, and didn't show the slightest surprise. Instead, he showed a warm smile to Junko. Well, you get on the carriage first. And that guy called Little Lin, take off his black clothes and change into our clothes. Junko's small hand was grasped by Yang Chendong's big hand, and pulled into the carriage. Perhaps because the force was too great, she lost control for a moment and directly rushed forward, until she hit Yang Chendong's broad arms. Only then did she stop. Suddenly being held in Yang Chendong's arms, her nose could smell the strong smell of male hormones. For a moment, Junko was so frightened by the sudden change in front of her that she didn't dare to move. Don't look at how confident she was in front of men, but it was the first time for her to be so close to the opposite sex. Even her father didn't hold her like this. Now, feeling the strong heartbeat in Yang Chendong's chest, she was intoxicated for a moment. Chapter 240. Yang Chendong didn't feel anything wrong. For Junko to throw herself into his arms, he just thought that he had used too much strength just now. This was caused by his underestimation of Junko's body weight. Junko still had a confused expression on her face as she hid in Yang Chendong's arms. A group of people had arrived in front of the carriage a dozen meters away. When these people saw the corpses on the ground and the smell of blood, they instinctively raised their short swords and spears in their hands. The atmosphere instantly became cold and solemn. "Who are you?" the general leading the group asked in a nervous tone. In his hand, he was holding a fireball that could be fired into the air at any time. As long as the fireball was in the air, this area would quickly be surrounded by the Ming army. At that time, even a mouse would find it difficult to escape. "Who are you? Why don't you greet the Duke of Loyalty? Whose subordinates are you?" Seeing more and more people in the night, Tiger's Mane was not afraid at all. On the contrary, he was full of energy and shouted loudly. This shout also caused Junko, who was in the luxurious carriage, to tremble. She couldn't help but put more strength into her hands. Her hands that were holding Yang Chendong's waist tightened even more. "Don't be nervous, nothing will happen." Feeling Junko's nervousness and fear, Yang Chendong stretched out his right hand and patted her back gently. That magnetic voice was like the sound of nature pouring into Junko's ears, making her feel so warm and so reassuring. From childhood to adulthood, because of her identity, Junko didn't have much contact with the opposite sex. There were even fewer men who could give her a sense of security. It seemed that her father, the emperor, was one of them. Most of the time, he didn't accompany her. Instead, he was always worried about the state affairs, so it became an extravagant hope for her to ask for her father's embrace. Now, lying in Yang Chendong's arms, feeling the strong and clear heartbeat, coupled with the sound that could make people feel at ease, at this moment, Junko actually had a kind of intoxicated feeling. It was just like the old saying, "It's not the wine that gets you drunk, but you get yourself drunk." On the street, Tiger's Mane's voice could be heard clearly. The soldiers of the warden's office, who had been somewhat nervous and ready to fight at any moment, quickly dispersed when they heard that the person opposite them was the Duke of Loyalty. The leading general knelt on the ground and said in an excited voice, "I am a subordinate of the 5 cities military division Sun Piang. Greetings, Duke of Loyalty. Greetings, Duke of Loyalty and Courage." Hundreds of soldiers from the warden's office of the 5 cities followed their general and knelt on the ground, shouting loudly. After defeating Walla twice in a row, the Duke of Loyalty had been given the title of War God in the Warden's office of the 5 cities. Everyone respected Yuan. Now that they knew that the one who came was the War God, who would dare to have the thought of using swords and spears? Although there were many people, just the title of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage was enough to make them all kneel on the ground. This scene was seen by Jianghu, who had already lifted the curtain of the sedan. This scene immediately stimulated the depths of her heart and made her more interested in Yang Chendong. So it's Sun Piang's subordinates. You are all on the same side. Get up. Yang Chendong, who was sitting in the carriage, said in a clear voice. Then he said, Tiger's Mane, stay here and deal with the matter here. Find out who attacked me and be sure to give an explanation. The rest of you will follow me back to Yang village. Don't worry, Duke. Tiger's Mane bowed with his fists clasped. When he raised his head, he gave Yang Chendong a look of understanding. Obviously, he had understood the meaning of the young master. That was, he wanted to use this opportunity to make trouble and teach these people who killed Jianghu a lesson. Farewell, Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Hundreds of soldiers of the Warden's office of the 5 cities had just gotten up. When they saw that Yang Chendong was about to leave, they immediately knelt on the ground again and said in unison. Under the gaze of the great Ming Dynasty's soldiers, Yang Chendong's luxurious carriage drove out of the capital under the protection of the First Guard and Ling Feng. It went straight to the Yang village 15 miles south of the city. When the carriage left the capital, the originally dark carriage suddenly lit up. The lantern in the carriage was lit. Jianghu also left Yang Chendong's arms with a red face. At this time, she finally had a chance to look around. When she saw that the carriage was so spacious that there was no problem for her to lie down here, she couldn't help but widen her eyes in surprise. As a princess, she had seen more than the average person since she was a child. It was not that she had never seen a spacious carriage, but it was the first time that she had seen such a spacious carriage, especially one that moved so steadily without any bumps. Of course, she didn't know that the bottom of the carriage was installed with a shock absorption system. The wheels were not ordinary wooden wheels, but were replaced with tires. It could be said that for the sake of comfort, many things in the large warehouse were used. This was why it could be so spacious and stable. Of course, there was only one such carriage in the entire Great Ming Dynasty. Even the emperor didn't have one. He looked around curiously. After a while, he finally got a general idea of the place. Then, he noticed that Yang Chendong was staring at him. He immediately lowered his head and said embarrassedly, Sorry, I'm really ignorant. I've made a fool of myself in front of Dong Shui. What? Anyone who enters the carriage for the first time will be like this. It's not strange. Yang Chendong shook his head and said indifferently. What? Did a lot of people enter the carriage? I don't know who they are. Jianghu asked curiously, but she was afraid that only she knew what she was thinking. There are several people. My 4 wives have stayed here before, and my 7th sister. Yang Chendong seemed to think for a moment, and then answered unhurriedly. When she heard Yang Chendong say that he already had 4 wives, Jianghu's eyes showed a trace of struggle. She seemed to be entangled with something, but her good psychological quality made her quickly return to normal. Is that so? Dong Shui already has 4 wives. It's really enviable. That's not bad. Many people say the same thing. Yang Chendong laughed, as if having 4 wives was something to be proud of. After laughing, he asked curiously, Miss Jianghu, I saved you today. Can you tell me why those people wanted to kill you? This. Didn't I say it before? I was born in a merchant family, and these people came for money. Fortunately, Dong Shui passed by here and saved this little girl's life. Jianghu didn't even blink when she lied. She just opened her mouth. All of this was something she had thought out after entering the carriage. Before she had a complete understanding of Yang Chendong, she would not easily reveal her identity. So that's how it is. In that case, those killers were killed by my servants and guards. You should be safe now, so it's better to say goodbye. Yang Chendong saw that Junko didn't speak the truth, so he didn't point it out, but said very casually. It was as if saving her was really a casual thing for him. Yang Chendong's sudden words suddenly made Junko's face change. Just a moment ago, she was thinking about how to get out of this carriage and leave Yang Chendong. She didn't believe that a person who could marry 4 wives could ignore her beauty. But before she could say anything, he took the initiative to ask her to leave. She achieved her goal so easily, which made Junko somewhat uncomfortable and gave birth to another idea. This was the wilderness. If she got off the carriage, where would she go? If the killers were following her, they wouldn't be so lucky to meet Yang Chendong. Since it was dangerous to leave here, why not follow Yang Chendong back to the Yang family manor? Although there might be other dangers, it was better than losing one's life. Thinking that Yang Chendong was a loyal duke of the great Ming dynasty, he shouldn't do things that were difficult for her. Junko instantly made a decision. When she looked at the 6th young master, there was a trace of obvious gentleness in her eyes. Dong Shuai, this little girl is alone. You can't really leave me here. It's so dark outside, I will be scared. How can you be alone? Don't you have a guard? You can rest assured that I will leave him to protect you. Yang Chendong pretended to be puzzled and said. Hearing that Yang Chendong misunderstood her meaning, Junko was ashamed and angry at his ignorance, but she still continued to explain, Dong Shuai, Junko didn't mean that. I mean, it's dark outside, I will be scared. It's better to let me rest in the Yang family manor for a night. It won't be too late to continue tomorrow. Oh? You want to go back to the Yang family manor with me? It's just that my 2 wives are in the manor, I'm afraid it's not easy to explain. Yang Chendong saw that the little white rabbit had entered the wolf's den, and while he was very proud, he pretended to be very embarrassed and said. Hearing that he was comparing her with his wives, Junko was angry. Who do you think I am to you? Moreover, it was disgraceful to be a concubine as a princess. But thinking that she needed his help, she had to pull a long face and said in a provocative tone. What's wrong? The elegant and talented Dong Shuai is actually so afraid of his wife? Not afraid? Yang Chendong shook his head. It's respect. Forget it, it's really dark outside. It's really inappropriate to leave a little girl like you here. Then come back to the manor with me. But remember, you have to leave after breakfast tomorrow morning. Do you understand? Seeing that Yang Chendong agreed, Junko didn't have any psychological burden to stay in the Yang family manor for a night. She quickly nodded. Okay, I'll stay for a night. Chapter 241. Junko's appearance at the moment was very cute, her big eyes sparkling. After Yang Chendong saw it, he secretly praised her in his heart and nodded. Okay, it's a deal. The carriage had no intention of stopping. Without any other orders from Yang Chendong, the large group of people smoothly entered the Yang village. As soon as they entered the village, Yang Chendong took the initiative to get off the carriage. Under the escort of Beta Persei, Yang Wu, and Qiu Vi, they went straight to the inner courtyard. Junko and Kobayashi were arranged to stay in the guest room in the outer courtyard. When Junko arrived at this new place, she was a little curious. However, because she had just been frightened and the sky was already dark, she felt tired. After entering the guest room, she simply washed her face and went to sleep. Soon, she fell asleep. Kobayashi was a lot more alert. Although he fell on the bed, his 6 senses were not closed. But no one had any ideas about him, so his caution was unnecessary. In the study of the inner courtyard of the Yang village, Tiger's man had rushed back. He and the people of the 5 cities' warden's office had dealt with the bodies of the killers. After finding out that the killers were actually Japanese warriors, they had already reported it. The next step was handed over to the Genie Guards and the East Faction Guards to take over. They just needed to wait for the news. Good, you did a good job. It's already late. Except for the ones on duty, everyone else should go to rest. By the way, don't forget tomorrow morning's morning exercise. Not only can you not stop, but you also have to make a noise, understand? Yang Chendong patted Tiger's man's shoulder, and after thanking everyone for their hard work, he made some arrangements for tomorrow morning. After taking care of business, Yang Chendong returned to his bedroom. First Madame Hu Yan and second Madame Xiao Yin were already waiting for him. As soon as he entered the room, the two of them eagerly stepped forward to help him take off his clothes with great enthusiasm. Yang Chendong stood there and enjoyed the service of the beauties. After his coat was taken off, Hu Yan's careful voice sounded in his ear. Roku, I heard that the Japanese girl named Junko was brought back to the village by you, right? That's right. She was being hunted down tonight. My husband happened to pass by and saved her. Yang Chendong chuckled as he replied. How could he not know what Hu Yan and Xiao Yin were thinking? However, now was not the time to explain too much. He wasn't 100% sure how things would develop, and he wouldn't say anything if he wasn't sure. Hu Yan and Xiao Yin were clearly not satisfied with his nonchalant answer. However, as a married woman, she couldn't say much. On the day they married Yang Chendong, they were already prepared to share it with others. After all, their husband was too outstanding. Such a person was destined to be extraordinary. Rather than having the time to be jealous here, she might as well take this opportunity to give birth to a child for him. This way, she would have no worries for the rest of her life and would not have to worry about anything. Lu Lang, let us sisters serve you while you rest. After making up their minds, Hu Yan and Xiao Yin looked at each other and made a decision. Both of them began to lean toward Yang Chendong. Good, then let's rest together. Yang Chendong was happy to see this. While laughing, he held the two women in his arms and then rolled to the side of the big bed. Compared to Yang Chendong's happy life, Aoki Yuki's was much more miserable. First, when he learned that Princess Junko had appeared in the Great Ming Dynasty, he was nervous and sent his guard, Ikari, to take action with ninjas and samurai. Originally, he thought that he would succeed. But who would have thought that not long ago, Ikari came back and said that he had failed. And this was not the most annoying thing. Then, the people of the embroidered uniform guard came and asked Aoki Yuki to follow them to the yamen on the grounds of assisting in the investigation. Although he had not been in the Great Ming Dynasty for long, he still had some understanding of the yamen of the embroidered uniform guard, which was the imperial court. Of course, Aoki Yuki refused. He even used the reason that he was an envoy of Japan to protest and oppose. If it was in the future, an envoy of a country would never be easily touched. Even if there was conclusive evidence, it would still need to be approved layer by layer. In the end, it was unknown when it would be done. But now, the Great Ming Dynasty was still prosperous, and Japan was relatively weak. Of course, Aoki Yuki's protest would have no effect. Under the suppression of several burly embroidered uniform guard, he was quickly taken out, leaving the guard, Ikari, who was constantly stomping his feet. It was late at night, and he did not have any better ideas. He could only think about bringing a large sum of money to the officials of the Ministry of Rights at dawn to see how to save his superior. But he did not know that the reason why the embroidered uniform guard acted so quickly was because the matter involved Yang Chendong. The name of the Duke of Loyalty was not only among the common people, but also among the people, the 5 cities' warden's office, and even the embroidered uniform guard. Just a while ago, because they offended this person, many eunuchs were threatened with their lives. Now that this matter was related to him, no one dared to take it lightly. At least, they had to take the suspect into custody first. They could not give the Duke of Loyalty a chance to flip out. As for the Ministry of Rights, needless to say, Yuan's grandfather was the Minister of the Ministry of Rights. If the people there dared to do anything, it would be a strange thing. Of course, Ikari did not know all of this. He was waiting for the arrival of dawn in nervousness and apprehension. After the night, it was dawn. This was a truth that had never changed. When the sun of the new day shone into the room, Junko woke up. But just as she woke up, she saw two maidservants serving her in her line of sight. "Miss, get up. Wash up first." Oh. In an unfamiliar environment, Junko, who had no opinion of her own, said obediently. Then, she had the opportunity to enjoy the new toothpaste and toothbrush for the first time. Then, it was the appearance of the soap. The fresh fragrance made Junko yearn for it. After washing her face and rinsing her mouth, the divine mirror appeared. The clear mirror reflected the most perfect side of Junko. Then came the new shampoo, the unforgettable perfume spray, and so on. Even the toilet paper was so soft. Junko was completely dumbfounded by all this. Originally, she thought that the life in the palace was luxurious enough. But compared with here, there was still a huge gap. The clothes were very fitting. Among them, there was a shameful bra and other things. Wearing it was comfortable and showed off her figure. It could be said that it was an eye-opener for Junko. She felt that her whole person was completely changed. Along with the arrival of breakfast, the delicious food made Junko eat until she was full. She felt that the amount of food she had eaten in a day was not as much as the amount of food she had eaten today. She changed her clothes and ate until she was full. With a satisfied mood, Junko walked out of the room and came to the courtyard. Then, she saw a scene that she would never forget for the rest of her life. 30 men wearing camouflage uniforms were waving shiny bayonets to practice assassination in the slightly cold morning weather. Their uniform movements made the 30 people's performance seem as if they were one person. Their performance was so uniform that it was as if they were one. But what was even more shocking was that the moment these people rushed out with their bayonets, they didn't make the slightest sound. Because of this, it gave people a terrible feeling. Whether it was practicing formations or weapons, they had to shout. Only in this way could they show their momentum. But these 30 people were doing the opposite. They didn't make the slightest sound during their training. That dull feeling made people couldn't help but give birth to a sense of oppression. It was this feeling that made Junko's chest feel tight and even suffocated. In the distance, the loyal Duke Yang Chendong, who was wearing a vest, was running quickly with more than a dozen people. This scene also made Junko, who was wrapped in a coat, surprised. One must know that the new year was coming, and the weather was cold. Ordinary people couldn't wait to hide their hands and feet in a robe. But how could he wear so little? Not only Yang Chendong, but even the men around him were wearing the same clothes. They all exposed their arms and legs and ran behind Yang Chendong. Among the crowd, Junko also saw her guard captain, Xiao Lin. Xiao Lin was also in the team, and he was also wearing thin clothes. Although he didn't expose his arms and legs like Yang Chendong, he was only wearing underwear. More importantly, he was running at the back of the team. Looking at him, he seemed to be panting to the point of exhaustion. Junko had some understanding of Xiao Lin's physical fitness. He was one of the best among the royal guards, but now, he was at the very back of the team. He was 7 or 8 body positions behind Yang Chendong. This was something that no one dared to imagine. But now, everything was really happening. Junko covered her mouth with her hands in horror. At this moment, she was really shocked. At the same time, Xiao Lin was also shocked. As a guard of the Japanese imperial family, and one of the best, Xiao Lin was somewhat conceited. It was difficult for ordinary people to enter his eyes. This proud personality made him walk around the village after waking up in the morning. This behavior was naturally stopped by the patrolling Ling Feng. As a warrior, if there was a disagreement, a fight would break out. In a 1-against-2 battle, Shaolin bravely fought the two Ling brothers. In his opinion, it should be easy for him to defeat his opponents, but it took him half a cup of tea's time to defeat the two. At this moment, the other Ling Feng had already surrounded the place, which attracted the attention of the tallest man beside Yang Chendong, Beta Persei, who also rushed over. In a 1-against-2 battle, Shaolin still won. This made the other Ling Feng feel a kind of shame. They all rubbed their hands, wanting to fight to regain their face. Beta Persei, who was better at fighting, saw that Shaolin won because of his strange and flexible movements. This might be the advantage of ninjas, that young master said. Chapter 242. His nimble movements often prevented the Ling Feng's close-range attacks from touching him. How were they going to fight this battle? Of course, this did not mean that the Ling Feng would not be Shaolin's opponent in a real fight. If they fought with their lives on the line, as long as one of them kept the opponent occupied, they could still create an opportunity for the other comrade to kill. Not to mention, when they fought with their lives on the line, would Shaolin be able to pass through the rain of bullets and reach Ling Feng? But no matter what, Shaolin had won. Beta Persei took a big step forward. "You're not bad, but I don't know if you dare to fight me. Of course, you've just fought and wasted some energy. To be fair, how about I let you use my left hand?" Beta Persei stood up and offered to use his left hand to fight Shaolin. This was an insult to a samurai. Shaolin would not back down. For the sake of a samurai's dignity, he readily agreed. The surrounding Ling Feng quickly moved aside, creating a large circle for the two of them to fight. When the two of them stood still, Shaolin made his move. He took a step forward and appeared behind Beta Persei. Then, he threw a 1-inch punch at Beta Persei's waist. The speed of this attack was several times faster than when he was fighting against Cold Edge. This time, the other Cold Edge members who were watching the show sucked in a breath of cold air. At this moment, everyone realized that Shaolin had not used his full strength. Beta Persei stood there motionless, as if he did not notice Shaolin's attack. Only when the opponent's 1-inch punch was about to hit his waist and the distance was less than 15 centimeters, did he suddenly turn around and use his right elbow to block the 1-inch punch. Under Beta Persei's sudden counterattack, Shaolin only saw a blur in front of his eyes. Then, he felt a sharp pain in his right fist. It felt as if he had hit a piece of iron. The strong rebound force forced him to take 3 steps back before he could regain his footing. Just as he regained his footing, a heart-piercing kick was aimed at his chest. Instinctively, Shaolin stretched out his fists to block, but his expression changed drastically upon contact. The power of this kick was so great that Shaolin couldn't block it even after using all of his strength. After being kicked, he flew backward until he flew for about 7 or 8 steps before landing on the ground with a loud crash. With just an elbow and a kick, Shaolin was sent sprawling on the ground. This scene naturally caused the other Ling Feng members to cheer loudly. Shaolin, who had been knocked to the ground, endured the pain from his arm and slowly stood up. "You're just relying on your tall stature and strength. If we're competing in patience, you're definitely no match for me. You want to compete in endurance? Then why don't we run? I think this is a way to show off our endurance, right?" A voice that wasn't very loud, but just loud enough for everyone present to hear clearly rang out. Listening to the voice, everyone saw Yang Chendong, who was wearing a vest and shorts, walking over with Tiger's Mane, Yang Si, Yang Wu, Yang Lu, Chiu Vi, and other members of the First Guard team. "Hello, young master." As soon as Yang Chendong appeared, all the Ling Feng members stepped forward to greet him, and they all stood up straight, looking very energetic. "Good morning, everyone," Yang Chendong said to everyone with a smile, then walked to Shaolin's side. "If you want to compete in endurance, this young master is going to run now. You can try to keep up with me. As long as you can surpass us, it proves that you are stronger. How about it?" Hearing that there is going to be a running competition, and it was Loyal Gong who took the initiative to mention it, Shaolin was immediately overjoyed. In the past, when ninja training, the requirements for speed are very strict, and there are also extremely strict requirements for endurance, so running is also a common thing. Now that someone is competing with him in this direction, he won't be polite. He immediately agreed. "Okay, I hope that Loyal Gong won't act shamelessly when you lose." "Don't act shamelessly. Remember, if you really lose, you have to admit your shortcomings, ha ha ha." Yang Chendong, who looked up to the sky and laughed, said to Shaolin, then he took big strides and began his morning run. Except for Ling Feng, who needs to train assassination, the other brothers followed Yang Chendong and began to run all the way. It's not accurate to say that they are running. It's far less specific than running. Because there was no intention of slowing down from the beginning, Yang Chendong, who took the lead, took big strides and accelerated his speed. Shaolin is indeed a little uncomfortable with Yang Chendong's running method. But he is not afraid. In his view, this is just Loyal Gong trying to show off, trying to pull away from him and make him completely lose confidence. And as long as he can keep up with the other party's pace and rhythm, the other party will be powerless in the later stage, and at that time, it will be time for him to overtake. With this thought and confidence, Shaolin also shook off his arms and took big strides to keep up. And this time, he ran a full 6 laps. Each lap is 400 meters, and 6 laps is a distance of nearly 5 miles. His footsteps have been maintained at a constant speed, and Shaolin, who followed behind, did not notice that Loyal Gong is tired. This development is completely different from what he imagined. Shaolin used all his strength to keep up, and began to take off his clothes. Originally, because of the weather, he was tightly wrapped, but now he began to take off his coat. After a while, only his underwear was left on his body. But even so, he still felt hot. The most important thing is that the distance between him and Yang Chendong is getting farther and farther. After another 6 laps, he has already run 5 kilometers. Shaolin felt that he has reached his limit, but when he looked at Yang Chendong, his expression still didn't change, and his footsteps were still light. At this moment, if Shaolin doesn't know how powerful Yang Chendong is, then all his years of learning martial arts are in vain. At this moment, his heart gave birth to the idea of admitting defeat. And at this time, Junko appeared and saw this scene in front of her. The appearance of the goddess in Shaolin's heart seemed to have suddenly poured strength into him. His legs, which were originally as heavy as iron and lead, regained their strength. He began to exert his strength to chase, and he actually overtook the 2 guards. Yang Chendong, who was running in front, felt the change behind him. The corner of his mouth just smiled slightly, and then he also began to accelerate. The moment he exerted his strength, Shaolin, who saw a glimmer of hope, was left behind by 7 or 8 meters. The distance between the 2 sides continued to increase, and finally, Shaolin couldn't see any hope. At this moment, he knew that he was defeated, completely defeated. When a person's heart has no hope and fighting spirit, sleepiness and fatigue will all surge into the body. Shaolin, who felt that his feet were getting heavier and heavier, finally insisted on running half a lap, and finally fell to the ground with a plop, unable to stand up. After Shaolin fell, a guard quickly came forward and helped him up. Then, a big bowl of steaming meat soup was sent to his mouth, and he was poured into his mouth. After a while, Shaolin exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and opened his eyes again. He's fine. Send him to rest first, and at the same time, give him a nutritious meal. After seeing Shaolin open his eyes again, the expression on an experienced guard's face relaxed, and then he gave his suggestion to the other guards. Shaolin was carried away, and on the other side, Yang Chendong also finished running 10 kilometers with his brothers. After stopping, they didn't immediately rest. Instead, they did all kinds of exercises, such as kicking, bending, boxing, jumping. Junko didn't know whether it was because of an illusion or some other reason, but she kept feeling that Yang Chendong's body was as light as a swallow at this moment. After a stick of incense worth of exercise, Yang Chendong ordered, "Go take a bath first, then we'll have dinner." Immediately, everyone dispersed and went to the bathhouse in the outer courtyard of Yangjia village. When everyone passed by Junko, no one even looked at her, as if she was nothing but air. If it was before, Junko, who was usually ignored by others, would definitely be annoyed and embarrassed. But now, she couldn't get angry at all, because at this time, Yang Chendong came to her side. "I'm sorry, your guard is too competitive, so I taught him a little lesson. But don't worry, he will be fine. After this training, he will only become stronger. By the way, I'm also sweaty, so I need to take a bath first. And, do you want to join me?" When he said the last sentence, Yang Chendong's eyes had a trace of a naughty smile. Junko, who was teased by his words, immediately blushed and quickly lowered her head. After a long time, she said, "Who wants to take a bath with you?" After saying this, when she looked up, she found that Yang Chendong had already disappeared, only leaving a heavy masculine scent in the air. But for some reason, Junko didn't feel a trace of disgust, and the appearance of Yang Chendong's strong body when he was running just now flashed in her mind. In just one morning, she had seen too many things that she had never seen before. Not to mention the countless strange things, even her guard captain, Kobayashi, was called a weakling by Yang Chendong's words. All of this subverted Junko's previous understanding, making her curious about the Yangjia village. "I'm going to stay here and see what secrets there are." It was as if he had made a big decision and found a reasonable excuse for himself to stay. After stomping her feet, Junko turned and walked into the courtyard. When Junko came here, all the people who had just been training had changed into new clothes and were eating meat and drinking soup. The fragrance was overflowing, making Junko, who had just eaten breakfast, unconsciously felt hungry again. But after all, she was a girl, and she paid great attention to her figure, so this gluttonous person didn't do anything to her. And it was in this crowd that she saw Yang Chendong, who had changed into a green robe. She saw him eating meat and drinking soup with his subordinates. Chapter 243. This was also one of Yang Chendong's habits. Unless there was a major event, he would do his morning exercise as usual and eat with his brothers afterwards. This was an opportunity to improve everyone's relationship. How could he waste it? The dignified Duke of the Great Ming Dynasty actually dined with his servants. How incredible was this in Junko's eyes? At least in her impression, when her father ate, except for major festivals, her mother would sometimes sit with him and accompany him. Generally, he ate alone, which seemed to show his noble status. But when it came to Yang Chendong, everything seemed to have changed. But they seemed to be getting along so well. Could it be that her father's method was wrong? Or was this Yang Chendong originally a different kind of person? Unconsciously, Junko's heart was filled with more and more doubts, which also made her curious about the Yang village. Yang Chendong, who was eating, noticed the changes on Junko's face. Looking at her frowning, gently nodding, and shaking her head, he felt that she was so cute. After a while, he stood up and took the initiative to come to Junko's side. "Miss Junko, I have allowed you to stay here for one night. Now it's already dawn, you should go and see your guards. If there is no problem, it's time for you to leave." "Oh, then I'll go and see little Lin Kun." She didn't know why, but the closer she was to Yang Chendong, the faster her heart beat. She couldn't figure out the reason, so she turned around in a panic and went straight to the place where little Lin was resting. In little Lin's room, after eating a lot of delicious food, his body was gradually recovering. When he heard the door open and saw Junko appear, little Lin struggled to sit up from the bed. "Princess. You are too tired, don't get up, just lie down." Junko hurriedly came to the bed and sat down on the chair beside little Lin's bed. "Princess, I'm fine. It's just that I ran too fast, so I'm tired. I'll be fine after a rest. By the way, when are we leaving here?" Little Lin was afraid that the goddess would look down on him, so he tried to show off. Junko didn't answer little Lin's question, but asked, "Little Lin Kun, can you tell me your impression of the Yang village?" Imprint? Shaolin seemed to be seriously considering this question for the first time. He pondered for a moment before answering, "Princess, Yang village is very mysterious. The people here are also very strong. Their training methods are also very unique. Very powerful?" Junko seemed to have caught the key point and asked, "How powerful? Compared to my imperial father's guards?" "This." Shaolin scratched his head. "I don't know since we haven't competed. But it seems that the people here are stronger." "What? Are they more powerful than father's guards?" Junko asked in shock. She had never practiced martial arts before, so she didn't know much about it. But since it was Shaolin who said it, it shouldn't be wrong. After all, taking the initiative to slap their own face was not something that a warrior was willing to do. However, he still admitted it. That could only mean one thing, and that was that the people from the Yang village were really strong. "How are they compared to Ashikaga Yoshimasa's guards?" Junko continued to ask. This was the main point she wanted to know. Compared to the general's guards? They must be stronger. Shaolin seriously thought for a moment and then gave a rough answer. As if to increase his persuasiveness, he added, "The people here use advanced firearms that can fire continuously. This is something that the general doesn't have. If they really fight, I'm afraid that he will suffer a great loss." "So powerful!" Junko exclaimed again. This time, there was a trace of joy on her face. If everything was as Shaolin said, then once she drew Yang Chendong to her side, it was equivalent to having the strength to deal with the general. In that case, her imperial father wouldn't be so threatened. At this moment, Junko made a decision in her heart. That was to subdue Yang Chendong and make him work for her. If this was the case, her trip to the great Ming Dynasty would be worthwhile. "Shaolin Kun, your body is still very weak. How about this, you stay here for 2 days. I will explain it to Dong Shuai." Since he wanted to stay, he needed a valid reason. Shaolin's physical condition was the best excuse he could come up with. "No. Princess, Shaolin can continue to walk without rest. I can also protect Princess's safety." Shaolin didn't understand these things. He just didn't want to admit defeat. "Enough." Junko suddenly stopped Shaolin. "I said that your body is weak and you need to rest. Are you going to disobey my order?" Shaolin was caught off guard by the sudden change in the princess, who had a gentle expression on her face just a moment ago. But the education he received since childhood made him instinctively agree. This lowly one doesn't dare to disobey princess's order. "Very good, since that's the case, do as I say." Seeing Shaolin yield, Junko's face reappeared with satisfaction. Then she walked out of the room and went out of the courtyard to look for Yang Chendong. At this time, Yang Chendong had already eaten breakfast and was in his study looking at the various materials sent by the Intelligence Bureau. Hu Yan and Xiaoyin were attending to him on his left and right. The three of them were chatting and laughing, and it was truly a scene full of spring. But in this kind of atmosphere, Tiger's mane suddenly knocked on the door and said, "Young master, Miss Junko wants to see you." "She hasn't left yet?" "Well, let her come in." Yang Chendong was well aware of this, but his face showed a puzzled expression, as if he was surprised by this result. On the other hand, Hu Yan and Xiaoyin couldn't help but look at him, but then they smiled like flowers. They didn't have the slightest intention to be angry. After Tiger's mane got approval, he led Junko into the study. As she entered, the 6 eyes of the 3 women unconsciously collided with each other. This was the first time the 3 women met. Their eyes seemed ordinary, but in fact, they were filled with jealousy. Speaking of which, the 3 women were extremely beautiful women. It could be said that each of them had their own merits. Hu Yan was beautiful, Xiao Yin was full of charm, and Junko was cute and moving. Any man who could have one of them was already a blessing that he had done countless good deeds in his previous life. But when the 3 women were together with the same man, it was really like the old saying, the most difficult thing to bear was the beauty's favor. After a short exchange of glances, the 3 women separated. Hu Yan was holding a teacup, while Xiao Yin was pouring tea to express their close relationship with Yang Chendong. Only Junko was left standing there alone, seemingly a little embarrassed. With Junko's identity and the treatment she had received before, she should turn around and leave at this moment. She was the dream lover of many men. Why would she need to fight with other women for a man? But when she thought of all the things she had seen in Yang village, she finally gave in. She would never forget the words her father said to her when she left Japan, and the eager look in his eyes. How did he promise that he would help his father find a powerful ally? And now, the ally was standing in front of her. If she gave up because of her personality, it would be too stupid. For the sake of her goal and to not disappoint her father, Junko suppressed some of her anger and said to Yang Chendong with a smile, "Dong Shui, this little girl came to tell you that because the bodyguard's body is too weak, I want to stay for 2 more days. Please help me." On the way here, Junko was thinking about what kind of good words to say to make Yang Chendong let her stay. For this, she had indeed thought of some words to say. But the moment she saw Hu Yan and Xiao Yin, she rejected all of her ideas and took the most direct way. If Yang Chendong was willing to let her stay, it meant that she still had some place in his heart. What she wanted to do next was equivalent to seeing hope. On the other hand, there was no need to say anything. Even if she forced him to stay, it would be difficult to achieve her goal. Wasn't the directness of her words a test of Junko's? She wanted to see what Yang Chendong's true attitude towards her was. Junko's straightforwardness made Yang Chendong, who was sitting behind the desk, feel a little surprised. He had already guessed that since Junko appeared, she would not leave so easily. She would even find all kinds of excuses to stay and ask for help. But he did not expect her to be so direct. This was beyond his expectations. Fortunately, the other party's goal was still the same. They just wanted to stay. This was in line with some of his thoughts. Since she was so straightforward as a girl, there was no need for him to refuse. He immediately nodded and said, "Okay, if that's the case, you can stay for 2 more days." Yang Chendong agreed so readily. When Junko heard it, her face lit up. She did not say any more words of thanks after achieving her goal. She turned around and walked out of the study, leaving Hu Yan and Xiao Yin behind. They seemed a little unhappy. Yang Chendong naturally did not explain too much about why he let Junko stay, what kind of identity she had, and how she would help him in the future. There were many things that he would not say casually before doing it. Otherwise, if Hu Yan and Xiao Yin heard it, they would think that he had lost his mind. Hee, it's going to be the new year soon. Come, let's discuss what we should prepare for the new year. Yang Chendong laughed and hugged Hu Yan and Xiao Yin, using practical actions to divert the 2 women's attention. This move was really good. Soon, the 2 women's attention was diverted from the matter of Junko staying. They began to talk about the new year. Chapter 244. It was 1450 AD. The spring festival bell rang and the new year arrived. The Yang family manor was more than twice as lively as last year. The 4 madams gathered around Yang Chendong and smiled happily. The servants, guards, and guards of the Yang family all received recognition from the 6th young master's performance, making them overjoyed. The servants of the manor, Immortal Abode, Heavens Beyond, Yang Bao, and the staff of the Yang family bank all received a big red packet, at least 5 taels of silver. There was no cap on the red packet, making everyone smile. There was a saying, if you have money, you can celebrate the new year every day. Everyone received benefits. Naturally, everyone was amazed by the benefits of the 6th young master, and their hearts became firmer. The first day of the new year passed happily. On the second day of the new year, Yang Chendong sat in a luxurious carriage and began to visit the capital. For example, the brothers and sisters of the Yang family, the Hu family, and some ministers who were on good terms with Yang Chendong had to visit once. Although he was now the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, he was only 20 years old. During such a festive time like the New Year, of course he couldn't put on airs. As a junior, he visited people to build relationships and increase friendships. He was very busy. Because there were too many people who needed to maintain relationships with him, even the eunuchs like Jin Ing in the palace also needed to send a congratulatory gift. This didn't mean that he was afraid of anyone. He just didn't want to give the other party an excuse to find trouble with him. And he was busy until the 7th day of the new year. This was also the day of the opening of the Yang Family Academy. Before the new year, Yuan and the others who came to find trouble with him were so embarrassed that they couldn't show their faces. In particular, the poem, The History of Lion-Eating Shi, was even more amazing. What was worth mentioning was that Yang Chendong actually took the initiative to go to the He residence to find Yuan during the New Year's visit. He gave Yuan the draft of The History of Lion-Eating Shi that he wrote himself. That day, he had said that if Yuan did not lower his head and admit his mistake, the manuscript of The History of Lion-Eating Shi would not be published. But in reality, Yang Chendong didn't do that. With the idea that it was better to squash enmity than keep it alive, he took the initiative to visit Yuan, giving him enough face. This was what it meant to be a good person. Taking advantage of the New Year period, he abandoned his status as a duke and came as a junior. No matter what he did, no one would say anything. Yang Chendong's way of doing things naturally made Yuan endlessly grateful. Now that there was a way out, how could he not take it? Not to mention, he had been troubled by this matter these days. Many great scholars who were interested in The History of Lion-Eating Shi had taken the initiative to find him, saying that they hoped that he could lower his head and get the manuscript. This was another characteristic of literati. Once they encountered a good article, they would definitely want to read it. Otherwise, they would not be able to eat or sleep well. Among these great scholars, some of their identities were not ordinary. In terms of qualifications, they were comparable to Yuan. This was really difficult for Yuan, because he really couldn't lower his head and ask for advice from a young boy. When he was troubled, there was no lively event in the He residence this year during the New Year. At this moment, Yang Chendong came and took the initiative to give him a way out by giving him the manuscript of The History of Lion-Eating Shi. How could Yuan give him any face? He personally went out of the door and welcomed Yang Chendong into the main hall with a hearty laugh. This was a handshake and peace. After settling Yuan, the enrollment of the Yang Family Academy was not so stressful, and the preliminary enrollment was completed in just a few days. Not to mention, Yang Chendong was really famous. Originally, he only needed to recruit 50 people, but the number of people who signed up had reached 500. He had no choice but to get them into the academy first, and then select the suitable candidates after the assessment. On the 7th day of the new year, the entrance of the Yang Family Academy next to the Yang Family Manor could be said to be very lively. More than 500 young people stood in groups of 2s and 3s on the spacious square. Among them were young master nobles and young masters who wore silk and satin. There were also some poor people who wore cotton clothes and even had patches on their clothes. The snow began to fall on the 4th day of the new year, and it continued to fall sparsely until last night. 3 consecutive days of heavy snow turned the Yang Family Manor into a white ocean. The branches, roads, and roofs were all covered with a thick layer of snow. Groups of people waiting outside the Yang family academy could not help but sigh at the omen of a bountiful year. They all said that today would be a good year, with good weather and a good harvest. At 8 in the morning, when the number of people gathered outside the manor had exceeded 2,000, the Yang family manor's gate opened from the inside. A group of mercenaries in camouflage walked out. Behind them was Yang Chendong in a green robe. His steps were steady, and his face was filled with a very amiable smile. Under the protection of Tiger's Mane on the left, and Beta Persei on the right, he came forward. The appearance of Yang Chendong made the noisy crowd quickly quiet down. He had this kind of magic, no matter where he appeared, he would always quickly become the focus of attention. At this point, although the contact time was not long, Junko, who was behind Yang Chendong in the crowd, seemed to be used to it. In about half a cup of tea's time, Yang Chendong and his group arrived at the gate of the Yang family academy, which made the atmosphere even quieter. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Yang Chendong strode forward and arrived alone at the academy's closed door. Looking at the door with festive couplets pasted on it, Yang Chendong stood still and turned around abruptly, looking at the crowd of outsiders. "Thank you for supporting me so much, and thank you for coming to support me. Later, no matter who it is, whether or not you are selected as a student of the academy, there will be a small gift for you." "Yes, young master." Tiger's Mane, who was called, nodded in agreement, then turned back and raised his palms and clapped 3 times. After 3 claps, 4 strong men came out of the Yang family manor's team. They put the boxes in their hands on the ground and opened them. Suddenly, a burst of silver light shone directly into everyone's eyes. 2 boxes, a total of 10,000 taels of silver. This was the small gift Yang Chendong talked about. There were about 2,000 people here, and if it was divided evenly, each person would get 5 taels of silver. For many poor people, this was definitely not a small amount of wealth. 10,000 taels of silver with a wave of his hand, immediately caused a burst of astonishment to come out from the crowd. In this regard, Yang Chendong was not surprised at all. He laughed and said, "It's still after the new year, all of this is just a gift from me to everyone. Of course, you can choose not to accept it, but I will never take back what I have given out. If someone doesn't want it, then the others can just divide it. Duke is righteous." Someone in the crowd took the lead and shouted with a sharp voice. Suddenly, this voice attracted countless people to follow and flatter. "Ha ha ha." With a forthright laugh, Yang Chendong waved his hand, and 10,000 taels of silver were poured out from the wooden box and poured on the ground, piling up a small silver mountain. Each silver was 5 taels of silver, and there were 2,000 taels of silver. It was quite a large scale. With such a gift in hand, the atmosphere at the scene immediately became much more lively. Even Junko, who was in the crowd, couldn't help but blink when she saw this scene. Obviously, her heart was throbbing at this moment. Since she was young, she had learned Han culture under the guidance of others, so she understood the great Ming dynasty better than the average person. Naturally, she knew that 5 taels of silver per person could help an ordinary person a lot and could buy a lot of good things. 10,000 taels of silver, there were not many people in the entire great Ming dynasty who could do this. For the officials, there were even fewer people who dared to take out such a thing in public. Yang Chendong was one of the exceptions, but anyone who knew him didn't know how much his ability to make money was, and this thing was just a drizzle. Yuan and the others in the crowd were also shocked by the scene of Yang Chendong's attack. It was just that, after all, they were officials of the imperial court. As long as they wanted to use the power in their hands, they never lacked money, not to mention that he only had 5 taels of silver in his hands, so they wouldn't be moved by him. On the contrary, they were more interested in Yang Chendong's literary talent and knowledge. After being shocked by the history of lion-eating Shi that day, they had been thinking about whether there was any good work that could be written by Yang Chendong, so that they could learn and experience it. With such a thought, Yuan stepped out of the crowd, wearing a thick and warm cotton robe, slowly raised his hands, cupped his fist and said, "Duke Zhongdan, today is a festive day. I don't know if there is any good work for us to admire and learn from." Yuan asked for a poem. He didn't come to undermine him, but to repay him. Yang Chendong took the initiative to come to give him a New Year's greeting and the manuscript of History of Lion Eating Sure, so he finally had a way out and didn't have to be forced by other people. Because of this, it was necessary to come this time to support the opening of the academy, and asking for a poem was the most common way for scholars to communicate with each other. Just by using the words, admire and learn, he had already raised Yang Chendong's position very high. "I don't dare, I don't dare." Yang Chendong was gratified by Yuan's reciprocation, but his mouth was very polite and his face was extremely humble. The so-called good poem needs the accumulation of inspiration and knowledge. How can I compare with Sir He in this aspect? I'm ashamed, I'm ashamed. Ah, Duke Zhongdan, why are you so polite? I know that with your talent, it is not a problem to write a poem. Besides, today is a good day for the opening of the Yang Academy. As the first teacher, writing a poem is something that should be done. Yuan laughed, and his tone was full of relaxation. He was also telling Yang Chendong that on such a good day, how could there only be money and not good poems? Wasn't this a disrespect to scholars? Chapter 245. Of course, on the other hand, it could also be said that Yuan was creating more opportunities for Yang Chendong to become famous. This time, in order to open the academy, Yang Chendong had spent a lot of money to invite some great scholars. Although they were rejected everywhere, there were still people who agreed to come to the Yang family's academy to be teachers for money and a better life. However, there would always be differences between teachers. For example, Yang Chendong himself considered himself to be the chief teacher. Even if he was the chief teacher, how could he not perform at all in such a situation? That's right, that's right. Many others chimed in at this moment. Some of them might be looking for a lively scene, while others wanted to see Yang Chendong make a fool of himself. Of course, there were also some who wanted to listen to a good article that could shake the ancients and dazzle the contemporaries to comfort themselves. With so many people chiming in just a short while, the 2,000 people in the crowd spoke out in unison, all of them requesting Yang Chendong, the chief teacher cum dean, to come up with a new poem to boost their prestige. With so many people having such a request, Yang Chendong knew that he had to come up with something. In fact, he really wanted to show off his skills. Because he had refuted Yuan and the others before, he had made a name that he was not to be trifled with. But in fact, among the scholars, there were still many who looked down on him. They always thought that a young boy would not have much real talent and strength. The so-called academy was just a way to gain fame. In response to these discussions, the Security Bureau reported many people, but Yang Chendong did not intend to make a fuss about it. This was not because he was broad-minded, but because he knew that the most difficult thing for a person to change was their attitude and perception. Even if he took action to deal with one or two people, it would not have any effect on the overall situation. Since that was the case, it was better to just let it be and let time and facts make the final decision. However, in the process, Yang Chendong would continue to work hard to change the mentality of the people of the Great Ming Dynasty, the way they looked at things and the way they did things. The premise to accomplish all this was to ensure that he himself was the strongest. Good poetry was also a kind of weapon. It was a sharp weapon that was specifically targeted at scholars. It made them feel ashamed of their inferiority and slowly gained their recognition. Now that the Yang Chendong Academy was about to open for business, Yuan and the others had the same idea. Yang Chendong decided to satisfy them. In his mind, he began to flip through the famous poems that he had read in his previous life. When he saw the pure white snow around him, he nodded lightly and had a thought. Speaking of the grandeur of a poem that was about snow, it had to be the great man's Spring in Qin Garden, Snow. Yang Chendong's heart was filled with gratitude for the legacy left to him by the great man of his generation. He gently lifted his green robe, looked up at the sky, and concentrated his qi in his dantian. He then said with a powerful voice, "Yang family village, Snow." The scenery of the northern kingdom was magnificent. Thousands of miles were covered in ice, and tens of thousands of miles of snow fluttered about. Looking inside and outside the Great Wall, there was only the boundless expanse of the great river. The mountain dances like a silver snake, the plains like a wax elephant, wanting to compete with the Heaven Duke. Su Qing was dressed in red and white, looking exceptionally enchanting. There were so many beauties in the country, attracting countless heroes to bow down to them. Emperor Shiqin, Han Wu, was slightly inferior in literary talent. Tang's sect, Song Zhu, was slightly inferior in style. Genghis Khan, the heavenly son of a generation, only knew how to shoot a big eagle with a bow. The past is the past. Counting the heroes, it depends on the present. The clear voice was still resounding between heaven and earth, but at this moment, the noisy crowd had already become silent. Everyone was silent at this moment. Anyone who knew a little about poetry could feel the grandeur of the poem Yang Family Village, Snow, and the courage of the ambition. Even those who didn't know about poetry were shocked by the powerful momentum of Yang Chendong's recitation. They didn't dare to make a sound. Junko was also in the crowd. With her understanding of Chinese, she could naturally understand the poem Yang Family Village, Snow. Because she understood it, she was very surprised. She couldn't imagine that such a sentimental and majestic poem would come from the mouth of Yang Chendong, who was only 20 years old. In the front row of the crowd, Yuan and other great scholars' representatives were trembling with excitement at this moment. They knew more about poetry than others. Because of this, they could understand the role and meaning of this poem in the first place. If the previous History of the Lion Eating the Shi Family was a work of trickery and was created with enough understanding of Chinese characters, then Yang Family Village, Snow, showed a kind of broad feeling and a kind of lofty ambition. The past is the past. Counting the heroes, it depends on the three words, the past is the past, in the present. The words were full of endless meaning, and it was a wonderful finishing touch. The history of the feudal society in China was briefly mentioned, and it turned to the present era of the poet, pointing out the theme of, counting the heroes, it depends on the present era. The present era was a new era, and the new era needed new heroes to lead it. The heroes of the present era lived up to the mission of history and surpassed the heroes in history. They had more outstanding talents and would create unprecedented great achievements. This was the poet's firm self-confidence and great ambition. This conclusion, which shocked the ages, made a declaration that surpassed history and expressed the ambition to change the world. At that moment, he thought for thousands of years. At that moment, he saw the future. At that moment, he was full of lofty sentiments. At that moment, he looked down on the past and present. The entire poem reflected a kind of broad-mindedness and arrogance. Every sentence carried an extremely deep meaning. Once one carefully pondered over it, every word was like a jewel, and every sentence was full of fine sentences. At this moment, Yuan was completely convinced. The poem Yang Family Village, Snow, had completely conquered him. Convinced, he was the first to applaud. Good. Good poem, good mood, good mind. Loyal and courageous, your talent is admirable. He even said the word admirable. It could be seen that at this time, Yuan was really impressed by Yang Chendong's talent. With him as an example, the other literati also nodded their heads and congratulated Yang Chendong with their fists clasped in front of him. With the literati taking the lead, the others naturally followed to congratulate. Yang Chendong smiled and cupped his fists to everyone. He knew that the two consecutive styles were very successful. Next, he would see the real academy. he turned around and suddenly stretched out his hands. His fists turned into palms and pushed the door of the Yang family academy behind him. With this sudden force, the originally heavy door opened from the outside. With a creaking sound, the two iron blocks on the left and right of the Yang family academy's door appeared in front of everyone. It was not correct to say that it was two iron blocks. Although it was iron, it had a round iron body and a long iron handle. It was like a machine in front of everyone. At this moment, behind Yang Chendong, Yuan and the others also walked over. They also noticed the two big iron blocks with a cement base. Out of curiosity, everyone stopped and looked at the rare thing in front of them. They were speechless for a while. Yang Chendong had brought too many rare things to everyone. At this point, they were no longer as shocked as they were at the beginning. Therefore, at this moment, everyone's eyes fell on the Duke of Loyalty, wanting to see how he would explain this thing. "Someone, bring me the basin." Yang Chendong, who was chuckling, strode forward and came to the side of the iron block. He reached out and grabbed the iron handle. Then, his arm slowly pressed down. Fall, rise, fall. The rhythm was even and slow. When Tiger's Mane took out a basin and placed it on one end of the iron block, clean water came out from it and fell into the basin like the Milky Way. Ah! It's working! The people closest to it saw it the most clearly. When they saw the water flowing out, they couldn't help but take a step back and then let out a scream. There was no need to shout. Everyone noticed that there was a lot of clear water flowing out. For a moment, everyone was surprised. They were obviously very curious about the iron thing that could work after a few moves. Some of the people in the crowd who had done farm work even widened their eyes. They suddenly thought that if they had this kind of thing in the land they planted, wouldn't they not be afraid of drought? Yes, this is a water pressure well, a tool to draw water from the ground. The water pressure well is a tool to draw underground water to the ground. It is made of cast iron and the bottom is a cement-like block. The head of the well is the water outlet. The back of the well is thick and thin. The tail is a pressure handle connected to the heart of the well. It is about 20 to 30 centimeters long. It is often used, making it brighter. The heart of the well is a water guide skin. It is the force of this water guide skin and the heart of the well that draws the underground water up. The principle is not complicated. It's just that because of the backwardness of science and technology, no one has studied physics. Everyone wants to learn from the sage and Confucius. Naturally, they have no time to care about other things. This is the water pressure well. It can draw underground water up to a few meters deep, or even a dozen meters deep, to the ground through this method. With such a thing, people don't need to go to the river or the well to draw water in the future. They only need to install such a thing in the small courtyard to solve the problem of drinking water. When this thing is placed in the field, the problem of drought will be solved. Looking at the eyes focused on him, Yang Chendong's words were powerful and resonating, shaking the eardrums of everyone present. Ah! Is it really so magical? Quick, who is going to try the other one and see if it can really draw water? Yuan was also shocked by Yang Chendong's introduction. He remembered that there was a well in his courtyard. Usually, water was taken from there. However, there would often be dirty things falling on it. For the sake of cleanliness, it naturally needed someone to take care of it. However, there was no guarantee that the water was clean. But now, there was such a thing that could make water appear on the spot. It was really convenient and much more hygienic. When Yuan shouted, someone had already walked over. He reached out and pressed the iron handle of the water pressure well. After more than 10 times, water began to flow out of the iron mouth. Some people couldn't help but curiously go forward to have a taste. They immediately shouted excitedly, "So cool, so sweet." Chapter 246. Quick, let's go and have a taste. Hearing this, the crowd immediately became restless. Then, one by one, they crowded forward, wanting to try this new thing. Even Yang Chendong was pushed to the side because there were too many people rushing up. The attraction of the two pressurized water wells was beyond Yang Chendong's expectations. After all, water was an indispensable part of the human body, so it was easier to arouse people's concern. After a full hour, the crowd's interest in the pressurized water wells was not as great. In the courtyard of the Yang Family Academy, 10 tables had already been set up. Because there were too many people, this was for the preliminary examination. The 500 people would be reduced to at least 4/5, which meant that only 100 people would be left. Even if it was 100 people, perhaps only half of them would be left. The 1:5 ratio in the preliminary examination made many people eager to try, thinking about how to enter the academy. One had to know that once one entered this place, not only would no one collect tuition fees, on the contrary, they would also take care of your 3 meals a day. For some poor people, they could learn knowledge without spending any money. It was a good thing that they could not ask for. The so-called preliminary examination was actually just filling in a form. For those who were illiterate, there would be someone who would explain it to them. In the end, they just had to act according to what they thought. The whole process of filling in the form was not complicated. In just 2 hours, the work of more than 500 people was completed. Next was the tour of the Yang Family Academy. The spacious and bright classroom, the new tables and chairs, as well as the erasable blackboard and chalk, once again became the focus of everyone's eyes. The tour lasted all the way until noon. Only then did people leave in 2s and 3s. Yang Chendong had already said that the results would be announced in 2 days. Who could enter the Yang Family Academy to study would be announced at that time. More than 2,000 people left with a satisfied expression. For many people, there was no need for this trip today. After hearing such a majestic poem and seeing many new things, it was enough for them to brag and show off to others. Yuan also left. Before he left, he even politely told Yang Chendong that if there was a shortage of teachers in the academy and he happened to be off duty, he would be willing to help for free. With regards to Yuan's initiative to express goodwill, Yang Chendong naturally smiled and agreed. However, only he knew in his heart that what he was teaching was not the flashy 4 books and 5 classics. He was teaching the way of survival. This was also a preparation for accumulating talents in the future. After everyone left, the area outside the Yang Manor became quiet again. However, Yang Chendong had no intention of resting at all. In his hands, he was holding the information added by the applicants and was checking them one by one. The Security Bureau was already on standby and fully cooperating. Once there was a talent that the young master had his eyes on, they would investigate him as quickly as possible and then verify the authenticity of his identity. Although Yang Chendong, who had made a great contribution, had taken the initiative to leave the court, he knew that his contribution was too great, so great that even the emperor had to be wary of him. Now that he had made such a big move, it was impossible for the academy not to be on guard. In fact, the Security Bureau had already found 3 secret agents of the embroidered uniform guard from the applicants. Although they were good at forging identities, in front of the extremely professional Security Bureau, they still revealed their fox tails. Not only were there secret agents of the embroidered uniform guard in the capital, but also spies sent by Zhu Qizhen of the Ying sect, and there were as many as 8 of them. In addition, there were 2 spies sent by Walla Yeshen. Looking at the applicants screened by the Security Bureau, Yang Chendong shook his head and smiled. They really think highly of me. It seems that the young master can't keep a low profile even if he wants to. Of course, in addition to these spies, there were indeed people with good conditions among the applicants. For example, the 4 forms on the table. The first was Wang Si, the grandson of the Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji. He had previously been an editor of the Hanlin Academy and was a 7th-rank official. He was also one of Yang Chendong's friends from a long time ago. Later, when Zhu Qiyu had taken over, Jining had once sent people to blackmail Wang Ji. Because she had received very little, she was dissatisfied and removed Wang Si from his position. Although he was later reinstated, this young master no longer cared about official matters and became a frequent guest of the Immortal abode. This person had also applied for the Yang Clan Academy. When he saw his name on the table, Yang Chendong pulled him out. After some deep thought, he decided to take him as a student. Yang Chendong had his own considerations for this. His attitude toward the Great Ming Dynasty was to boil the frog in warm water. In order to achieve this, the prerequisite was that there was enough warm water. He viewed Wang Si as a part of the warm water, and he would be able to influence the young master and young lords. It was even possible that Wang Ji's attitude toward the Great Ming Dynasty would change. Yang Chendong had been very close to Wang Si for a period of time, so he had a certain understanding of this person. He was very smart and did not have the bad habits of a hedonistic young master. In addition, he was not very old. As long as he was willing to learn, he would be able to achieve great things. The second person he chose was called Feng Ku, a dispirited scholar. When he was young, because he was smart, he had become an elementary scholar early on, allowing him to see the hope of changing his family. He had immersed himself in books, unable to extricate himself. However, people like this often did not excel in anything other than studying. Feng Ku was an example of this. His learning speed was indeed very fast, but he was lacking in contact with others, so he did not have many connections with other scholars. When he was taking the high scholar examination, he was tricked by another elementary scholar. He had stuffed an unimportant note into the bottom of his shoe and brought it into the examination room. Originally, this was just a joke to tease him. However, he did not expect the result to be so dramatic. Feng Ku became an elementary scholar, but the elementary scholar who put the note failed. Out of revenge and jealousy, this person reported this matter to the imperial court. However, because things had changed, there was no way to investigate. However, because of this matter, Feng Ku was not given a position by the imperial court. He only received the status of a high scholar. In addition, his parents had passed away early and he was not good at business. In the end, the fields in his family were sold to buy books. Now, even eating became a problem. This kind of bookworm, no matter where he went, he wouldn't be liked by anyone. However, Yang Chendong knew that this kind of person was more suitable for professional work. For example, the scientists in the future. It was because they had no desires and only had knowledge and science in their eyes that they were able to create many inventions. Accepting this person was to train Feng Ku as a seedling to be a scientist. The third person was called Chang Qianhao. He was from Jiangnan and was the son of the Chang family. Chang Qianhao's family background was very good, and his family background wasn't bad either. His appearance was distinguished and elegant, and the way he conducted himself was very smooth and sly. More importantly, this person had a good hand in calculating accounts, so much so that he was called the divine mathematician. He was chosen by Yang Chendong because he was good at arithmetic. As his business grew bigger, there was a lack of talents in this area. He was going to train this person as a future finance official. Although the Chang family was rich, Yang Chendong did not care about them. He believed that when he gave enough benefits, Chang Qianhao would know how to choose. Not to mention, he was confident that in the process of teaching him, he would completely convince this person. The last person's identity was a bit special. Not only was she a woman, she was also an armed escort. The profession of an armed escort was still very dangerous. After all, there were not so many cameras in ancient times. It was not like where the money trucks were attacked. Usually, there would be a lot of clues. It was because of the lack of information that robberies happened again and again. It also made this profession very risky. Men were not willing to take such a big risk, let alone a woman. However, this woman could choose this profession, which showed how powerful she was. Tai Qingyi, 23 years old, was called Iron Face and Benevolent Heart. Iron Face referred to the woman's serious face. Benevolent Heart referred to her bodhisattva's heart. According to the investigation of the Security Bureau, most of the money this woman earned was given to the poor people. This time, the reason why she wanted to come to the Yang Academy to study was that she lost her hand in the process of delivering an escort. As an armed escort, some people could work for a lifetime, but some people could only do it once. It all depended on her to ensure that the escorts were not lost. Unfortunately, although Tai Qingyi was good at fighting, the number of robbers she encountered was 3 times more than her. She was outnumbered and finally lost her escort, which made her lose her livelihood. She came to the Yang Academy to find a chance to survive and learn more skills. Of course, this had a lot to do with Yang Qindong's reputation outside. Otherwise, it would be difficult for an ordinary scholar to catch the attention of this extraordinary woman. Oh, right, when we were delivering the money in the morning, this woman was the one who shouted for the Duke to be righteous. Ha ha ha. Yang Qindong suddenly thought of something and said. Then, he laughed heartily and stored this woman's information. Over the next 2 days, the 100 selected students were divided into groups. Some of them still needed to be observed, but some of them had been predetermined due to their various skills and specialties. It was just that they were unaware of it. Currently, the people outside were still waiting for the results in 2 days. The Wang residence in the capital. As the Minister of Personnel for many years, Wang Zhi's influence was not only shown by his position, but also his hidden influence that people did not dare to underestimate. There was a saying in the Ministry of Personnel that the officials were a level higher than the officials, and the recommendation authority was in their hands. This caused some people to think of ways to curry favor with this master. As time passed, the saying that Wang Zhi's disciples were all over the world was no longer an adjective, but a fact. Chapter 247. Wang Zhi was so prestigious, but his most beloved grandson, Wang Si, did not go against his wishes and applied for the Yang Academy. After learning the truth, the minister flew into a rage in his study and called Wang Si and his son over to give them a good scolding. When it came to his grandson, Wang Zhi cared about him more than just love. He hoped that the power of the Wang family could continue, at least not fall, so he always paid attention to the teaching and training of his descendants. All along, Wang Si's performance was reassuring. At such a young age, he was already an editor of the Hanlin Academy and a 7th-rank official. If he was sent out of the capital, he would at least be a county magistrate. But who would have thought that after being suspended from his duties, he no longer had any desire to improve himself when he was reinstated. Not only did he eat and drink every day, he even applied for the Yang Family Academy behind Wang Zhi's back. How could Wang Zhi not be angry? In the study, Wang Zhi knelt on the ground after being reprimanded, but his face was full of dissatisfaction. Grandfather, didn't you say that the Duke of Loyalty and Courage has a promising future and is very talented? You also said that I should learn from him when I have time. Now that I have applied for the Yang Academy and will become his student, why are you not happy? I am now 27 years old, but I don't feel ashamed because my teacher is younger than me. You don't think that I have disgraced the Wang family because of this, do you? Shut up. Hearing his grandson's bluntness, Wang Zhi was so angry that his beard curled up. What do you know? The Duke of Loyalty and Courage is indeed very talented and capable. I don't object to you befriending him and learning from him. But it is completely different to acknowledge him as your teacher. You have also heard of the saying that a teacher for a day is a father for life. This is equivalent to tying you and him together. If one day, when the emperor wants to deal with him, won't you be implicated? Implicated? Grandfather, are you saying that the emperor wants to deal with the Duke of Loyalty and Courage? Wang Si keenly sensed something and asked carefully. Not now. But can't you see that the Duke of Loyalty and Courage's contributions are too great, so great that his contributions are enough to shake the emperor? Let me ask, which emperor in the world would allow someone with greater contributions than himself to exist? It's only a matter of time before we deal with him. Wang Zhi shook his head and said with certainty. What Wang Zhi said was not only what he thought, but also what the other officials thought. Everyone almost unanimously thought that the emperor would deal with Duke Zhongdan sooner or later. He didn't make a move now because there were still too many places that needed to be used. However, once the emperor's position was completely stabilized and his strength increased, how could a mountain contain two tigers? It was precisely because of this that many officials did not get too close to Yang Chendong, in case something happened to the loyal and courageous minister in the future. Someone would settle accounts after the autumn and find trouble with them. While everyone was thinking of ways to distance themselves from Yang Chendong, his own grandson had taken him as a teacher. No wonder Wang Zhi was so angry. You haven't done anything to the Duke of Loyalty yet, have you? Besides, your grandson thinks highly of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. When he first entered the capital, I sensed that he wasn't ordinary. Along the way, the facts have proven this. Even the Walla's army was defeated by him. If His Majesty wants to do anything to him, he probably won't be able to get much out of it. If things go wrong, he might even end up injuring himself. If that's the case, your grandson has walked the right path today, taking the initiative before others. Wang Xi didn't think much of his grandfather's words. In truth, with his intelligence, he had already analyzed the situation. After analyzing it, he had come to this decision. He believed that one couldn't put all their eggs in one basket. Otherwise, that would be the easiest way to cause problems. Wang Xi's retort left Wang Zhi speechless. Only now did he understand that it wasn't that his grandson didn't understand, but that he knew everything, which was why he had come to this decision. Seer, do you know how risky this is? Grandfather, your grandson has thought about it. But as long as your Majesty is still on the throne, the Wang clan will be fine, and your grandson will also be fine. Besides, your grandson isn't the only one taking the Duke of Loyalty as his teacher. If your grandson discovers that the Duke of Loyalty isn't as formidable as you imagined, your Majesty can use your authority to ground your grandson at any time. If that really happens and the matter gets out, even if something happens to him one day, no one will use this matter to make trouble for our Wang clan. Wang Xi's frank words left Wang Zhi completely dumbfounded. He hadn't expected that his grandson, despite his young age, would be able to think of everything. If that was the case, what was there to worry about? As long as he discovered that Yang Chendong wasn't someone who could accomplish great things, he could bring his grandson back. Not only that, he could also tell the outside world that he had sent his grandson to investigate. If things went well, there was a high chance that this would turn into a great achievement. The worst-case scenario was already bearable. Wang Zhi did not try to stop his grandson and agreed to it. Now, he was worried that his grandson would be accepted by Yang Chendong because of his relationship with him. If he couldn't enter the Yang Academy, then all of his thoughts would just be a bubble. This night, not only the Wang clan, but many other people were worried about this problem. Even the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, Lu Gui, who had sent out undercover agents, was worried. Although the 3 agents he sent out didn't seem to have any relationship with the embroidered uniform guard on the surface, it was true. As long as someone investigated carefully, they could still find some clues. If that was the case, wouldn't Yang Chendong think that he was a little girl and come to find trouble with him? For some reason, when he thought of Yang Chendong's strength, Lu Gui's heart was beating like a drum. This person wasn't someone to be trifled with. Furthermore, he never did business at a loss. At least, Lu Gui had never profited from his dealings with him. Lu Gui was still thinking about how to scheme against Yang Chendong. However, he didn't know that he had already been schemed against by someone else. In the prison of the embroidered uniform guard, the former Jianghu of the embroidered uniform guard, Tang Tong, was sitting on a bamboo mat with a depressed expression. Although it was called a bamboo mat, it was already in tatters. There was only a thin layer of it left. At this moment it was freezing outside, and the imperial prison was also very cold. However, even in such an environment, Tang Tong didn't dare to raise any objections. As a former Jianghu, he knew the rules too well. Many times, if you didn't speak or make a sound, you might suffer less because you were forgotten. However, if you insisted on standing up, these jailers wouldn't care about your previous position when they beat you up. He hugged his knees and sat on the ground. His eyes were listless and spiritless. Even when he heard the approaching footsteps, he didn't raise his head. It's time to eat. It was the jailer who gave out the food. When he walked past Tang Tong's room, a slightly moldy and black steamed bun was thrown out and rolled to his feet. This was Tang Tong's dinner. If it was outside, other than a beggar, it would probably be very difficult to attract anyone's attention. However, in the imperial prison, it was a good thing that could save lives and keep them alive. He was indeed a little hungry, but this black steamed bun really couldn't arouse his appetite. At this moment, he couldn't help but hate his choice. Why did he believe that Jining had to stay in the capital? If he had made another choice at that time and followed Chao Jixiang to Nanjing, perhaps it would have been a different scene. He sighed in his heart and reached out to take the black steamed bun. Then, he put it into his mouth with a hopeless expression. After taking a bite, the gloomy Tang Tong was still regretting his choice. However, after chewing a few times, his expression suddenly froze. Subsequently, his eyes widened as he vigilantly scanned his surroundings. When he saw that no one was paying attention to him, he carefully spat out the steamed bun that he had swallowed into his hands. Then, he saw a small piece of paper that was sandwiched between his hands. There was actually a piece of paper in his steamed bun. From the looks of it, there seemed to be writing on it. Tang Tong's heart thumped. He didn't believe that this was caused by the chef's carelessness. His intuition told him that someone must be sending him a message. But who could send him a message? He was now almost a cripple. Who would think of him? And who would have such great ability to avoid the jailers and bribe them to send him a message? How much power did this person have? With all kinds of questions, Tang Tong carefully opened the paper in his hand. Immediately, 3 lines of small words entered his eyes. At this moment, his breathing began to quicken, and soon, his eyes were filled with tears. Duke of Loyalty, it's actually the Duke of Loyalty. Yes, only he would be willing to use silver. He also has so much silver to do whatever he wants in the imperial prison. Thinking so in his heart, he quickly digested the contents of the paper. Not long after, his face began to change greatly. Then, his expression slowly calmed down. After a while, his heartbeat calmed down and his emotions calmed down. Tang Tong put the paper back into his mouth and swallowed it. Then, he stood up and held the iron cage with both hands and shouted outside. "Come, I want to see Ji Qian. I have something important to report." Today was the day of the Yang Family Academy's enrollment. In the morning, there were many people gathered outside the Yang family manor. Although it couldn't compare to the Xiaocai, High Scholar, and Jinshe. But for many people, if they could enter the Yang family academy, it would be a fresh start in their lives. When most people had gathered and the sun slowly rose, a group of people walked out of the Yang family manor. They held a list written in red words in their hands. Under everyone's gaze, they pasted it horizontally at the entrance of the Yang family academy. A total of 100 names appeared in front of everyone's eyes. When the list was posted, it immediately attracted many people to rush over and look up at the bottom of the list. There was only a 1/5 acceptance rate, and it was the early acceptance rate. Naturally, most people left with a face full of disappointment. But at the same time, there were some people who were excited. They had been chosen. In the eyes of these people, there were some who were excited, some who were excited, and some who were even arrogant and condescending. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.